that he is the living water, that if you want true life, you need to go to him. He's told the crowd that he has come from heaven, and that's where he is going back to. And then the last time, it was 3 weeks ago, we were in John, we learned that Jesus proclaimed himself mightily to be the light of the world. He said, if you follow me, you'll no longer walk in darkness, but experience true life. Well, at these claims, we know there were a lot of different responses to Jesus, right? Some were confused, others were angry, and then there was another category of people that we saw in verse 30 of chapter 8, where it said there, as Jesus was saying these things, many believed in him. So that's where we left off in John's Gospel. Well, today, what we're going to see is that Jesus specifically addresses these people here in verse 30. He is going to talk broadly to the religious group who hated him. But more specifically, we're going to see Jesus talk to the many who were there who said that they now believed. And I think what we're going to discover today is really surprising. Perhaps for some of us here today, it's going to be shocking. Because what Jesus is going to say to these people that day is this. Hey, look, I know that you've been listening to me, and I know in response to that, you say that you believe in me, but let me tell you who you are. It says this in verse 44. You are of your father, the devil. Jesus says to these people, and let's not sugarcoat this. He says to this people, to the crowd, you are children of Satan. And I'm not sure it can get much harsher than that. And here's the truth. Here's the reality for us today. What Jesus is ultimately saying in this text here today in John 8 is that each and every one of us, every single one of us, is a child of someone. And there are only two options. You are either a child of God, or you are a child of Satan. And there's no other category. There's no in between. And so, we have before us this morning a pretty harsh text, right? Aren't you excited that you're here? Finish the prayer fasting, going out with some encouragement. You're either a child of God or a child of Satan. That's the message. We have before us today this intense passage. But more than its intensity, it's urgent. This text is meant to serve as a warning to us. And in that, this passage is actually full of great grace. You see, Jesus wants us to know. He wants us to be able to answer the question, who do I ultimately belong to? He wants us to be able to assess for ourselves, am I a true disciple? Because listen, there are so many in our world who profess Christ. We know this. If you look at the statistics, like global statistics of how many people say that they're Christian, the number is quite high. A quarter, maybe a third say, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. I believe in God. Right? Many people declare themselves to be believers in Jesus. But the question is, who of us is genuine? Who is truly following? We need to be able to answer this question for ourselves. And we need to be able to answer this question for those who might be around us. The Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 13, he said this, examine yourselves to see if you are in the faith. He says, test yourselves. Or do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test? The question again this morning is, who passes the test? Who is considered a true child of God? That's what our text today in John 8 is all about. And so with that, let's enter this together. Verse 31 starts like this. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, pause. Again, just for context's sake, because this is just so important, Jesus is now talking to the Jews who said that they believed in him in verse 30. And again, it's to these people that he's going to lay down the hammer. like lay the smack down, right? It's to those who say that they believe in him, who he is going to, in a few minutes, say, you belong to Satan. And how can it be that people who believe in him, who believe in Jesus, who say that they believe in Jesus, even according to Jesus, can at the same time be called children of the devil? Well, we already know that there is such a thing as false disciples. We know that there is such a thing as false faith, right? We've seen this throughout the Gospel of John. For example, just in chapter 6, we witnessed this. There was this crowd there that was around Jesus. They're following Jesus. They're believing in Jesus. And they are with Jesus because Jesus was meeting their physical needs. Jesus was doing the miraculous around them and before them, giving them bread to eat. And so, it says in the text, they believed him and they followed him. But the moment that things presented a challenge, the moment that things got hard, the moment they listened to teaching from Jesus that they didn't like, what happened? They all left him, right? So what we are seeing here now in John chapter 8, at the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Booths, is not a new issue. The Bible is full of people who say that they believe, but who don't really believe. Actually, our writer, the Apostle John, talks about these people very specifically in one of his letters. He says this in 1 John chapter 2, it's verse 19. He says this about these types of people. He says, they went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out. These people who were professing faith, living with us, fellowshipping with us, they left us that it might become plain that they are not of us. John is saying there are going to be people who are going to be part-time, superficial, shallow, fake believers who won't last. They won't make it to the end. And Jesus is addressing those types of people here in our text. He says to them, you say that you believe in me. You say that you know me. But here's the truth about you. This starts again in verse 44. He says, you are of your father the devil. And then listen. And your will is to do your father the devil's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, now he puts it back on them, because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Ouch. You say you follow the light, but you really belong to darkness. And by the way, Jesus will come into the city of Jerusalem. I've already said this. He'll come into the city of Jerusalem 6 months after this. And once again, many will proclaim him to be the Savior. They will profess him as their king. They will even throw palm branches at his feet as a symbol and a sign of honor and glory and majesty. Thousands upon thousands will come together to do this. Possibly even several that are here in John chapter 8 will be there. And yet, it's these same people who just days later, we'll learn, will scream at Jesus, crucify him, crucify him. You see, false faith is everywhere. It's very common. And it's very, very dangerous. So how do we tell? How do we know who among us in our world is genuine, is real? And for some of us here today, this is really, really personal. Because you've struggled with this. Maybe you've never even told anyone. But you've really struggled with this. You sometimes wonder on your pillow at night. You sometimes wonder and ask yourself this question, am I really saved?